Chicago, 1998. It was a bitter cold afternoon in Lent when 21-year-old Sister Claire Donovan left St. Hope Convent for her regular confession. She never returned. Only her headscarf was found near the frozen edge of Whitmore Lake. The entire parish searched, prayed, and waited for days, then years, but there were no leads. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Now, 24 years later, a young priest stumbles upon an old Bible hidden in a dusty shelf, and what he finds inside reopens a mystery everyone had long buried. What happened to Sister Claire? And why does the trail now point toward Mexico, cartels, and a forgotten underground tunnel? Stay with us until the end, and if you're watching from somewhere special, let us know in the comments. Most people thought the case was closed long ago, just another loss folded into winter and silence. But what they didn't know was that something had been left behind, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be found. It began on a cold March afternoon in 1998, during Lent. Chicago was still gripped by snow, the streets near St. Hope Convent powdered with ice, and the sky a pale, unforgiving gray. 21-year-old Sister Claire Donovan wrapped herself in her brown habit and woolen scarf, the same one her grandmother had knitted for her years ago. With a Bible in her hand and her rosary in her coat pocket, she stepped outside for her weekly walk to confession, a quiet, familiar ritual. That was the last time anyone saw her. Sister Claire had always been the gentle one, soft-spoken, devout, and impossibly kind. She tended to the garden even in frost, sang hymns with her whole heart, and wrote prayers for the sick in careful, looping cursive. People in the parish loved her not just for her faith, but for her way of listening, truly listening. She never judged, only nodded with those wide, thoughtful eyes. She had arrived at St. Hope just 3 years earlier, a transfer from a Franciscan mission in Ohio, and almost immediately she had become the light of the convent. That morning she'd shared breakfast with Sister Agnes, oatmeal, sliced apple, and tea. Claire had laughed softly at Agnes' stories about stubborn parishioners and a broken water heater. Nothing in her demeanor had hinted at fear or unrest. "Offer your confession with your whole heart," Sister Agnes had reminded her as Claire rose from the table. Claire smiled, kissed the older woman gently on the cheek, and pulled on her gloves. "Always," she said. Then she was gone. When she didn't return by sundown, worry quickly turned to alarm. The parish priest and several nuns walked the snowy path toward St. Andrew's Church but found no sign of her. Calls were made. Police arrived. Volunteers combed the nearby woods with flashlights and dogs. On the third day, a local fisherman spotted something near the frozen edge of Whitmore Lake, a brown woolen scarf, half buried in slush. It was Claire's. But there were no footprints, no signs of struggle, no broken ice. It was as if she had simply vanished into the cold. The police leaned toward accidental drowning. Perhaps she had slipped near the lake, they suggested, fallen through thin ice, her body pulled under. But divers searched the waters and found nothing. Others whispered darker things, that she'd run away, that she'd broken her vows, even that she'd been lured by someone outside the church. But Sister Agnes never believed any of that. Claire wouldn't leave, she insisted. Not without her rosary, not without telling someone. And the rosary, her constant companion, was never found. Weeks turned into months, then years. Her name was added to the registry of the missing. The convent kept her room untouched. Every March they lit a candle by her window. And though the world forgot, inside those walls, her absence echoed like a hymn with no final note. Sister Agnes aged quietly, keeping Claire's picture on her nightstand. She walked into the snow with faith in her heart, she would often whisper, and I believe God walked with her. No one imagined the truth was still waiting, tucked between brittle pages and old dust. But in the quiet back room of St. Hope's Convent, something unexpected had survived the decades. A clue, a voice. A path that had been buried but not erased. And when a young priest reached for a forgotten Bible, the silence was broken. For nearly a quarter of a century, St. Hope Convent remained quiet about Sister Clare's disappearance, as if silence might protect them from what they feared to remember. But time, like dust, never settles forever. In early 2022, a young priest named Father Michael Ruiz was assigned to reorganize the aging convent's library, a task most had avoided for years. The room smelled of old pages and faint mildew, with books stacked in precarious towers, some untouched since the 1980s. Father Michael approached it with quiet reverence, knowing the room had once been Sister Clare's favorite place. He was 33, newly ordained, and still carried the kind of hopeful faith that hadn't yet been worn down by bureaucracy or loss. Each morning, he unlocked the library, poured himself a weak cup of coffee, and began sorting through the volumes. Latin hymnals, weathered catechisms, handwritten ledgers. But it wasn't until the third day, tucked behind a loose wooden panel on the bottom shelf, that he found something different. It was a Bible, thicker than most, with a soft leather cover faded almost to gray. Its pages were yellowed at the edges, and as he opened the front cover he noticed the name Sister Clare Donovan written in faint ink, the loops of the letters delicate but unmistakable. His breath caught. Carefully he turned the pages, half expecting to find marginalia or pressed flowers. Instead, near the back, something shifted beneath the spine. He tilted the book and watched as a small envelope slid out, no larger than a folded receipt. Inside it, pressed flat as if hidden for safety, were two items: an Amtrak train ticket from March 1998, Chicago to El Paso, and a hand-drawn map of what appeared to be the Juarez district in Mexico. The lines were delicate but purposeful, and at the center of the map was a small red cross drawn in pencil. Father Michael sat down, heart pounding. The convent had always assumed Clare never made it more than a few blocks from St. Hope. But this changed everything. The ticket had never been used, no tier marks, no station stamps, and the map who had drawn it, Clare, or someone else. He turned the Bible over in his hands and suddenly felt something he couldn't explain. A stillness, followed by the faintest warmth across his shoulders. He'd felt it before during prayer when a truth larger than him stirred close. He closed his eyes and whispered, "This was never an accident." He reported the discovery that afternoon. At first, the local police took the news with polite skepticism. But the details, the exact date of the ticket, the name, the matching handwriting, couldn't be ignored. Within days, the case was quietly reopened. The lead detective, a woman named Morales, flew in from state headquarters and met with Father Michael personally. She studied the map with professional curiosity, but admitted the area had changed drastically over 2 decades. Still, she saw what he did. Someone had tried to leave breadcrumbs. Someone had wanted to be found. Word spread quickly among the convent's remaining sisters. Some wept. Sister Agnes, now nearly blind, asked only to hold the Bible in her hands. She always loved El Paso, she whispered. Used to talk about the sun there. But no one had ever suspected Clare might have actually gone, or been taken. By the end of the week, investigators traced the ticket's purchase to a prepaid voucher paid in cash, untraceable. But the train company confirmed the serial number was authentic and unused. What disturbed the police more was that the hand-drawn map showed several alleyways and closed-down buildings, previously used by cartel-connected nonprofits in the early 2000s. One building in particular, marked by the Red Cross, had once been the site of a hospice facility, now long shuttered. Father Michael stood in the chapel that night, holding Clare's Bible in his hands as candlelight flickered around him. "If you're still out there," he whispered, "we're coming." What began in snow and silence had now shifted 1,400 miles south, toward the heat, the border, and a place Sister Clare was never supposed to reach. The discovery of the ticket and hand-drawn map didn't just reopen a long, cold missing person case. It lit a match under something far larger, something darker than anyone at St. Hope had ever imagined. Within days of the report, the local investigation quietly escalated to federal level. A field team from the DEA was briefed, and when they laid Sister Claire's map beside their own database of suspected cartel shell organizations, something clicked. The addresses marked in pencil lined up almost exactly with known drop points and fraudulent charity fronts scattered across Juarez. One name kept surfacing: Our Lady's Hands, a religious nonprofit that had operated on both sides of the border in the early 2000s, claiming to serve poor and undocumented migrants. But behind the facade, the DEA had long believed it was laundering money, trafficking laborers, and moving drugs in plain sight under the veil of holy work. What changed everything was a piece of analog footage pulled from an old case file. It was a shaky VHS tape, recorded during a 2004 DEA surveillance of one of Our Lady's Hands mission camps. The video was grainy, color-washed, and unstable. Yet in the background, passing between tents and medical stations, was a figure in a gray-blue habit, her eyes glancing briefly at the camera before turning away. The resolution was poor, but when agents paused the frame, one detail stood out. The woman's eyes, pale gray-blue, wide-set, unmistakable, Claire Donovan. They ran facial comparisons. A forensic analyst estimated a 78% match, remarkable given the quality. And when the photo was shown to locals who once worked at the camp, an old woman nodded slowly and said, "La curandera muta," the mute healer, a nun who never gave her name, never spoke a word, but who treated wounds with gentle hands and carried a rosary made of cloth and twine. She always seemed afraid, the woman added, but she never left like she was being watched. This emotional twist tore through Father Michael like a storm. For years, the church had prayed for closure. Now not only was Claire possibly alive, but she had been seen, recognized, remembered. Driven by faith in something deeper, he requested leave and traveled to El Paso, carrying Claire's Bible in his satchel. There he met with Robert Medina, a retired Border Patrol agent who had once flagged Our Lady's Hands for irregular activity. Medina, now in his 70s, had a sharp mind and a bitter tone. "We knew something was wrong," he told Michael. "Too many women coming in, none of them leaving. But the place had Vatican connections, political insulation." Medina described a raid that almost happened in 2005, until it was abruptly canceled. He had suspected the mission camp was a funnel point, bringing in women under the guise of charity, then forcing them into labor for cartel operations. Cleaning stash houses, cooking for armed men, even working in medical rooms without pay or freedom. "The nuns made good cover," he said. "Who suspects a nun of running a front?" Father Michael sat silently, letting the weight of it settle. "And if one of them was a missing woman from Chicago," he asked softly, "what would that mean for all the others?" Medina didn't answer. He only stared at the folder in Michael's hand and said, "It means you're not chasing a ghost story anymore. You're walking into a network." That night back in his rented motel room, Michael placed Claire's Bible on the nightstand and prayed. Not just for her, but for everyone like her. Women whose voices had been buried under paperwork and politics. He thought of that VHS image, the pale eyes that turned just slightly, as if she knew someone was watching. And he wondered, had she hoped someone might come? As the sun rose the next morning over the El Paso skyline, DEA agents prepared for renewed surveillance of the old mission campsite, now little more than an overgrown lot and a decaying warehouse. But what they were about to find would take the investigation in a direction no one expected. Because while many believed Claire Donovan was dead, the truth was about to prove otherwise. Though most believed this mystery had already given up its final answer, what waited beneath that crumbling building in Juarez would silence even the most hardened agents. On the morning of June 12th, the DEA, in coordination with Mexican federal police, raided the old hospice once run by the shuttered charity Our Lady's Hands. The structure was barely standing, walls caved inward, the roof sagging in places, weeds creeping through cracked tiles. But the investigators weren't looking above. They were listening below. Beneath the hospice floorboards, behind rusted hospital beds and the faint scent of mold, they found it. A wooden trapdoor nailed shut, long hidden under layers of dust and old mattresses. As they pried it open, a wave of cold air rose from the darkness. Flashlights cut through the black, revealing a narrow stone staircase. The silence was thick until they heard it. At first, it sounded like wind or the creaking of pipes. But as they descended, one of the agents held up his hand and whispered, "Listen." There, echoing faintly through the airshaft, came the sound of chanting. Soft, steady, unmistakably human. A woman's voice humming a melody older than memory. A hymn. One officer, a former seminarian, whispered, "Salve Regina." They followed the sound through a narrow corridor supported by rotting beams and damp stone. The walls were etched with scratches and faded carvings. At the end, a metal grate sealed an old ventilation tunnel. The chanting was louder now. A flashlight beam swept across the bars, and for a moment they saw her. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes half closed as if praying. Her frame was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp from years of hunger. She wore a tattered gray-blue habit, and in her lap her fingers moved slowly across a rosary, handmade from wood and string. When the lights reached her eyes, she blinked, then lifted her head. The officers didn't move. Her lips parted, and in a dry whisper she said, "God stayed with me in the dark." The rescue team worked quickly, breaking the lock, entering the chamber. They approached slowly, speaking softly in both English and Spanish. She did not flinch. She only clutched the rosary tighter, as if afraid they might take that from her too. One medic knelt beside her, offering water. She nodded weakly. When asked her name, she replied in a voice so hoarse it was nearly lost. Claire Donovan." There were no screams, no dramatic outbursts, only the stunned hush of men who had prepared for anything except this. Some had assumed they might find evidence. Others had expected bones. None had prepared to find a woman who had vanished 24 years ago still alive beneath their feet. The space was small, crude. A cot in the corner, a bucket, a broken candle holder, and along the walls dozens of religious carvings etched into the stone, crosses, saints, fragments of prayers. They were crude but full of devotion. This wasn't just a prison. It was a chapel built in captivity. Claire had survived not with force, but with faith. Paramedics wrapped her in blankets and began the process of transporting her above ground. As she was lifted onto the stretcher, her eyes met those of one agent, a woman who had grown up Catholic. Claire whispered, "I prayed for you." The agent wept. Outside, the air was warmer, louder. Media hadn't yet arrived, but word was spreading fast. Father Michael, waiting nearby under police instruction, was told moments later. When he heard she was alive, he sat down on the curb and covered his face with his hands. For a long time, he didn't move. But while the world began to breathe again, inside that underground room, another story had been left behind. In the corner, beneath the cot, officers found a small wooden box containing a weathered notebook. Its first page read, "Property of Sister Celia. If I do not live to see the sky again, let someone know the truth." Long after Claire had been carried out into the sunlight, after the sirens faded and the dust began to settle, one agent stayed behind. He returned to the underground room, scanning every inch with quiet care. Near the old cot, half covered by a crumbling linen sheet, he found it, a small wooden box, worn smooth by time and prayer. Inside was a journal wrapped in cloth, its pages brittle at the edges, its binding threadbare. Written in delicate cursive on the inside cover was a name, Sister Celia Rojas. What lay within those pages would unravel a new layer of horror and resilience. The first entries were dated 1998, the same year Claire vanished. Sister Celia, once a teacher at a mission school in San Antonio, had volunteered for a cross-border medical ministry that promised short-term outreach to underserved villages. But as she recounted, the invitation had been a trap. She and several others, including Claire, were offered transport in a marked van by men claiming to be affiliated with the archdiocese. Instead of reaching the town they were promised, they were driven into Mexico, sedated, and split up within hours. From there, Sister Celia's words turned darker. Page after page chronicled their lives beneath the hospice, a place she came to call the Hollow. The women were assigned to different tasks. Some were used for laundering cartel money through false mission reports. Others were forced into silent labor, cleaning, cooking, tending to wounded smugglers. Claire, Sister Celia wrote, was separated early on because of her nursing background. They made her clean infected wounds, stitch up knife slashes, even deliver a baby once. She cried quietly afterward, not because of the blood, but because she couldn't pray aloud. The journal held more than just narrative. Between lines of reflection and grief, Celia had recorded details. Names she overheard, hand signals the guards used, dates of movements. She even developed a code. In one entry, she explained how hymnal pages were used to smuggle information, verses underlined in certain patterns, or rosary beads arranged in unnatural sequences to mark time or signal distress. She taught the code to Claire, hoping that someday one of them might find a way to pass it to the outside world. One section described a terrifying night in 2004 when a group of young girls, no older than 15, were brought into the compound. Sister Celia begged the guards to let them go, reminding them these were children. She was punished, locked in the dark without food for 3 days, but Claire brought her scraps of bread through a vent. Even then, Celia wrote, she never gave up on goodness, never stopped believing we'd be found. The final pages grew more fragile, the ink fainter. Sister Celia's health had been declining. She wrote of chronic coughs, of losing track of time, of feeling her body slip away before her spirit was ready. Claire stays beside me, she wrote. She sings the old hymns, braids my hair, prays when I am too weak to whisper. I think God gave me to her so she wouldn't forget who she was, and she believes someone still remembers us. Her last words, scribbled in an uneven hand, simply read, Claire believes we could still be found. If you are reading this, please tell someone we were real. The journal was handed over to authorities that evening. It would become key evidence not only in the reopening of Claire's case, but in exposing a trafficking network that had stretched quietly across borders and parishes for over 2 decades. But more than evidence, it was a record of survival written in faith, fear, and the stubborn refusal to let truth rot in the dark. Still, one question haunted the agents and the church alike. How could a nun in Chicago end up hidden in a hospice beneath Juarez without a trace? While the Journal of Sister Celia painted a harrowing picture of what happened underground, it didn't explain how it all began. How Claire had been taken from a quiet convent in Chicago and delivered into the hands of a cartel. That answer came not from Mexico, but from within St. Hope itself. In the weeks following Claire's rescue, financial investigators combed through archived records from the convent, the archdiocese, and the charitable foundations connected to the church. What they found turned sorrow into anger. The Amtrak ticket discovered inside Claire's Bible, Chicago to El Paso, March 1998, had been purchased with church funds. At first, the transaction seemed like a clerical error, a reimbursement gone unfiled. But a closer look revealed a disturbing trail. The funds had been drawn from a discretionary account managed by a man named Thomas Renner, a former deacon assigned to St. Hope in the mid-1990s. Renner had left the church abruptly in 2001, citing family reasons, and relocated to Texas. His name had never come up during the original investigation. But now, buried in travel logs, donation slips, and letters, a pattern emerged. Renner had frequently facilitated youth mission trips across the southern border. At least 3 young women listed on those manifests had later been reported missing. Claire's name had never appeared because her trip had never been scheduled. The implication was chilling. Renner had been using his position to scout vulnerable women, especially nuns or novices with limited family contact, and funnel them into the cartel's network. He had access, he had trust, and no one suspected a thing. Sister Agnes, now frail but mentally sharp, was shown the transaction record and quietly set the paper down in her lap. She stared at the floor for a long time before whispering. She tried to tell me. When pressed, she explained that Claire's last few confessions had been odd, not sinful but cryptic. She'd spoken about being watched, about walking carefully, and not everyone who smiles being kind. At the time, Agnes had assumed it was anxiety. Claire was always sensitive, always carried the weight of others' pain. But now, with Renner's name in the open, the memories sharpened like broken glass. She once told me, Agnes said, that sometimes the wolf wears the same robe as the shepherd. The room went still. As the investigation deepened, more disturbing connections were found. Renner had corresponded with non-profit groups now known to be cartel fronts. He'd received cash honorariums that were never taxed. Several letters addressed to him were written in coded language, using scripture references that, when cross-referenced with Sister Celia's journal, matched dates and dropped points for women being moved. The church, though never formally complicit, had failed to notice, or failed to act. The Department of Justice opened a formal probe into 1990s cross-border religious missions. What began as a rescue had now become a reckoning. And though many within the church cooperated, the implications were unavoidable. A sacred institution had been used as cover for something evil. A place of refuge turned into a recruiting ground. For Claire, for Celia, and for the others, they had been betrayed not by strangers in dark alleys, but by someone who stood in the very same pews. The Archdiocese released a statement offering prayers, condolences, and a pledge for transparency. But it rang hollow for those closest to the truth. If they had just listened, Father Michael told reporters, Claire might not have been buried alive for 2 decades. Names once forgotten began resurfacing. Nuns marked as runaways, women who had abandoned their calling, records quietly closed with no follow-up. But now, every silence looked like omission. Every file stamped final begged to be reopened. And every locked drawer felt like it might hold another forgotten story, just waiting to be read. Though her name had been weaponized in headlines and investigations, Claire herself remained a mystery until the day she finally spoke. Lying in a narrow hospital bed, her eyes hollow but watchful, she whispered her first words to Father Michael. God's timing is perfect. It wasn't a declaration of survival. It was a quiet offering of faith, shaken but not destroyed. In the 24 years since she vanished, Claire had learned how to live without a voice. Not because she couldn't speak, but because silence became her only shield. The first year underground was the hardest. Everything familiar had been stripped from her, her habit, her crucifix, even her name. The men called her healer, but never sister. She was watched at all hours. Even prayer, spoken too loud, invited punishment. So she prayed beneath her breath, repeating Hail Marys with her lips barely moving. She carved crosses into the rotting wood beneath her mattress with shards of broken tile, hiding them when footsteps came near. In that world, faith had to be hidden like contraband, but she clung to it. Claire used her nursing knowledge to treat wounds with herbs and scraps. When the cartel guards were shot or burned, she dressed them. When young girls, trafficked, trembling, were brought in bleeding, she held their hands through the fever. She sang to them just above a whisper. Old hymns no one there understood. It gave her purpose, but it also gave her pain. Each girl reminded her of the children she once dreamed of teaching. In her last year at St. Hope, Claire had written a lesson plan for catechism. Simple prayers and drawings meant to help small hands feel close to God. She wanted to teach them in Spanish too. I wanted to be the kind of nun who made faith feel like home, she once told Sister Agnes. She never got the chance, but she never forgot the plan either. On the walls of her underground cell, Claire had sketched angels with charcoal made from burned scraps of hymnals. In the margins of discarded ledgers, she'd written memory verses in English and Spanish, short, clear, hopeful, not just for herself, for whoever came after, for someone who might read and believe she once had a future. Doctors later said her ribs had healed crooked, her hands showed signs of long-term calcium deficiency, and her vocal cords were damaged by years of disuse. But the most haunting scars weren't physical. When Father Michael asked her how she survived, she didn't answer with details. She simply looked at the window, where sunlight was filtering through thin curtains, and said, "You wait for God in the dark." He asked her what kept her going when she thought no one was looking. Claire smiled softly and reached for her wooden rosary, the one they'd found clutched in her hand beneath the hospice floor. Each bead had been hand-carved. Some were cracked. A few still held traces of dried blood. She passed it to Michael and said, "Every time I touched it, I remembered who I was. That was the only thing they couldn't take." And when he hesitated to ask the one question that had plagued the outside world for decades, why she never tried to run, Claire answered without being asked. "I wasn't waiting for rescue," she said. "I was waiting to be needed." Her voice cracked on that last word, not from sorrow, but from purpose. In that broken place she had become someone's nurse, someone's mother, someone's memory of kindness. And she believed it had not been wasted. The hospital staff wrote in their notes that she was cooperative, lucid, and gentle beyond explanation. But what stayed with them wasn't the quiet way she folded her blanket or the way she prayed before each meal. It was how, even after all she'd endured, she always made eye contact, as if she needed people to see she was still fully there. Her recovery would be slow. There were legal hearings ahead, physical therapy, counseling. But when the news asked how she'd survived, the headline missed the truth. Claire didn't just survive, she remembered, she endured, she kept her heart whole. And now, for the first time, people were listening. And now, as Claire faced the sunlight again, the world around her began to reckon with the silence that had allowed her suffering. Her story, once hidden under earth and concrete, was now splashed across television screens, newspaper headlines, and radio shows. But as journalists clamored to tell the miracle of the nun who had survived, another truth bled through the noise. Claire wasn't the only one. Within days of her rescue, federal investigators confirmed what had long been whispered in border communities but never proven. 3 other nuns, all listed as missing from separate parishes between 1995 and 2003, had ties to the same network of fake charities and shell missions run by cartel fronts. Their names, Sister Bernadette, Sister Maria Elena, and Sister Ruth, were suddenly resurrected from footnotes and dismissed cases. All 3 had vanished with little trace. And now, with Claire's journal and Sister Celia's writings as evidence, their disappearances no longer looked like isolated tragedies. They looked like part of a system. The revelation sent shockwaves through the church. While some dioceses responded with grief and open cooperation, others stalled. Questions piled up. How had no one traced the financial trails earlier? Who had approved the train ticket Claire never should have had? Why had letters from worried sisters gone unreturned? Former missionaries stepped forward with stories of whistleblowing ignored, of phone calls that never led to follow-ups, of strange visitors at night who asked too many questions. It became clear that at some level, local or higher, someone had helped keep the doors closed. Claire, still too weak to stand, watched the chaos unfold from a wheelchair near her hospital window. Her rosary remained in her hand like a lifeline. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't need to. Her silence, dignified and present, did more than 1,000 sound bites could. At a candlelight vigil held on the steps of St. Hope's, Father Michael stood before a crowd of hundreds. His voice cracked with something between anger and grief as he addressed them. "We failed them once. We will not fail again. Faith does not mean ignoring injustice. It means standing in its path and saying, 'No more.'" Behind him, candles flickered in the spring wind, and among the crowd, someone held up a faded photograph of Sister Bernadette. Survivors began to write letters, former girls who had passed through the hospice and remembered Claire's quiet care. One, now 32 and living in Phoenix, wrote, "She saved me when no one else saw me." Another, from Juarez, recalled her as the nurse who cried when they took us away. These voices built a bridge between stories long buried and those still unfolding. But even as pressure mounted on church leadership and border authorities to investigate more deeply, a cold question hung in the air. How many people had known and said nothing? A former assistant to the bishop admitted under questioning that he'd once reviewed a report about concerning activity at the Juarez mission, but was told by superiors to leave it to God. A customs official, now retired, revealed he'd flagged the charity for irregular shipments twice, but both times the file vanished. It was not one broken link, it was a broken chain. And yet, from her seat near the vigil's edge, Claire bowed her head, not in defeat but in mourning, not just for herself but for the others who hadn't come back. The world might call her a miracle, but she knew that a miracle without justice was only half the story. Now, for the first time, her truth was forcing the world to look inward. And in that truth was a call, silent but deafening, for accountability. And still, one shadow stretched long over every new discovery. Who else, behind those sacred walls, had helped it all stay hidden? Even as news stations moved on and headlines faded, the quiet wheels of justice kept turning, guided not by cameras, but by names that still needed answers. One of those names emerged from an overlooked corner of Juarez, tucked behind high adobe walls and brittle olive trees. A crumbling monastery where an elderly priest had lived in near-total silence for more than a decade. Locals called him Padre Salgado. Most assumed he was senile, maybe even mute. He rarely left his quarters, and when he did, he shuffled with his head low, eyes never meeting another's. But Claire remembered him. He had once visited the hospice where she was kept. Not often, only 3 or 4 times over the years, but enough. Enough for her to remember the smell of incense before his arrival, the hush that fell among the guards, the way trafficked girls were told to remain in their rooms. Enough to remember that he didn't speak because he didn't have to. His presence was command enough. When investigators, prompted by clues in Claire's recovered journal, entered his small cell at the monastery, they didn't expect to find much. What they uncovered instead sent chills through the entire team. Hidden behind a false back in his wooden wardrobe were meticulously kept ledgers, lists of names with coded notations. B2, M1, RX. There were grainy photographs of young women in nun habits, many of them frightened, some visibly injured. There were copies of what appeared to be absolution notes, signed with his trembling hand, written in Latin. Absolutions granted not to victims but to cartel leaders. Forgiveness sold like contraband. The truth hit like a slow, sickening wave. Padre Salgado wasn't just a bystander. He had been the spiritual gatekeeper of the operation, legitimizing horror under the veil of holiness. His silence hadn't been senility, it had been complicity. He was taken into custody without resistance. He didn't argue, didn't demand counsel. He simply sat, hands folded, as if waiting for a prayer that would not come. Claire heard the news from Father Michael, who now sat with her almost daily at the rehabilitation center. At first, she said nothing. But the next morning she asked to be taken to the detainment center. "I want to see him," she whispered. "I need to." The room they met in was gray and sterile. Claire, thin and pale, wore a long navy coat and clutched the same wooden rosary she'd held when they found her. Salgado was seated already, his back bent like a dry branch, his eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply sat across from him and looked at him. Minutes passed. Finally, she spoke. "You knew," she said. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but in that quiet space it struck like thunder. "You looked in their eyes. You smelled their fear. And still, you told yourself it was for God." Salgado didn't respond. His lips didn't part. His hands remained folded, but his chin trembled slightly. "I prayed with broken girls," Claire continued. "I treated wounds you blessed. I carved crosses while others carved flesh." Still silence. Until just once, his eyes lifted to meet hers, and a tear fell. He never offered confession, never admitted guilt, but the tear lingered on his cheek as Claire stood, adjusted her coat, and walked out without looking back. That single drop of salt water would become the final line in the final file, a symbol that some sins scream even when no words are spoken. But before justice could close the book, Claire still had one more place to return to, one that held both the beginning and the end. Long after that silent tear fell and the case files were closed, Claire remained, no longer hidden but not yet whole. At 45, her body still bore the weight of vanished years, and her voice, though steady, carried the echo of too much silence. She no longer wore the habit, not because she'd lost her faith, but because her faith had changed. It no longer needed walls, rituals, or robes. It lived now in small, quiet things. A whisper before sleep, the feel of wood beneath her fingers, the simple act of sitting beneath a tree and breathing without fear. Outside the hospital chapel, under a spreading cottonwood tree, Claire sat with a small carving knife and a block of cedar. Her hands moved slowly, shaping a simple cross. It wasn't for herself. It was for Sister Celia, for the woman who wrote in the dark, who whispered hope into rosaries, who believed they could still be found. Claire didn't speak as she worked, but the reverence was clear in every motion. This was prayer in its truest form. Sister Agnes approached quietly, leaning on her cane. Time had bent her back, but not her spirit. She watched Claire for a long moment, then sat beside her. "You brought light into the darkest place," she said softly, "and still you came home." Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed the finished cross into Agnes's hand, and together they looked up at the chapel's steeple, catching the golden light of late afternoon. The words of John 1:5 came to Agnes's mind, unspoken but felt. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Because in the end, this was never just about one missing woman. It was about how darkness hides in silence, and how sometimes the quietest voices bring the most powerful light. What disappears isn't always lost. Sometimes it's just waiting to be found. If this story moved you, let us know by commenting a 1 below. Where are you watching from? And have you ever held on to hope when everyone else let go? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be told.